Hello and welcome to the Nightworms YouTube channel. We're continuing on in our My Dark Library interview series with all of the authors who have written a novella for the My Dark Library line. I am so pleased to have with us today Pam Watts, PL Watts on the cover of the book. And if you have gotten your copy of the Bonnie Swans, this is the extra special edition here without the banner that I keep seeing, the not for sale banner from all the reviewers who have gotten an early copy. This is actually the one you want that goes with the collection of all the other books. This is book 5 in the My Dark Library series. And I'm so excited to sit here and talk to you today about the Bonnie Swans. So
I'm
welcome.
glad to be here. Thank you.
And I love your cozy room. Is this where you do your writing?
Yeah, or wherever, the thought strikes me.
Yeah, do you have like a schedule of writing, or do you just kind of happen to squeeze it in when you can?
I do. I'm actually at this point in my career really fortunate. I work in the evenings, so that gives me most of the day to write. I don't guarantee I'm at my desk all of those moments,
Right.
but yeah, but generally I get up and make my coffee and feed my cat and then sit down and work for a few hours and then sometimes write in the afternoon too, but sometimes read and do other things.
So it is something that you try to do in your daily life, writing.
Oh, very much, yeah, yeah, I write both memoir and horror, so I yeah, that's how I spend my days mostly is writing at this
Yeah,
point,
that's
yeah, and then I work in the evening.
I mean, I so just to set some early expectations for people who haven't read this yet, I was blown away by your storytelling voice, to be honest. Like, when the call went out and submissions were coming in, your title really struck me because the Bonnie Swans, like, I'm not, and that wasn't striking me as like a horror title. Like some of these others that were coming in, I was like, okay, I kind of get the gist of what that's going to be about. But when
Yeah.
this came in, I had no idea what this could possibly be about. So I was immediately intrigued and I downloaded it to my Kindle. I did not stop reading that for the duration. Like, I did have to put it down a few times just to live my life, but I needed to be right back into it. And so I knew almost early on that it was gonna be one of the selections.
Aw.
So I'm just wanna ask you, like, how long have you been practicing that Gothic voice?
Oh, that's a really good question. Um, well, so, I mean, funny story, when I started writing fiction, I thought that I was writing children's books.
Okay.
So and I actually, kind of discovered that I wasn't because I was naturally writing in that gothic tone, and, everyone around me was like, "Wow, this is really dark. I'm not sure this is actually for kids." Um, but yeah, so, I mean, I grew up my ancestors are from Appalachia, so I grew up listening to bluegrass, and
Oh,
I played in an Irish band in college, so I just, kind of those dark gothic ballads are live in my soul. So
okay.
I think that that's just, a tone that I play with naturally. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, if you still wanna write children's books, like, I loved when I was younger, I loved those darker stories. Like, I gravitated to, books that were written like The Witch of Blackbird Pond, for
I love
instance.
that book.
Yeah, and, like, I really loved The Secret Garden. Like, I read
Mhm.
The Secret Garden multiple times and had multiple editions. The name is escaping me right at the moment, but the author who wrote, like, The House with the Clock, John Bellairs, The House with the Clock in the
Mhm.
Walls, and the Mummy, the Will in the Crypt, like,
Ooh.
very dark, So,
Yeah.
I mean, if you wanted to write, I definitely think there's kids out there who want it.
Oh, I don't think the kids are the problem. I think that their parents and the publishing industry doesn't
Yeah.
like it.
Yeah, true. I mean, my mom was a horror fan, so she kind of
Oh,
pushed us in those directions anyway, but I don't think all
yeah.
kids are so lucky.
Yeah.
Yeah. The Bonnie Swans is actually inspired by a piece of writing. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so, as I mentioned, I played in an Irish group in college, and, I did an arrangement of, Lorena McKennett's version, The Bonnie Swans, but it's what's called a child's ballad. So John Childs collected all of these folk ballads in the 1800s, and The Bonnie Swans, is one of those folk ballads. It's called The Twa Sisters often, or Minori, Benori, the Cruel Sister. So it's
Yeah.
kind of a common song that gets told all the time. Clannad has a version, and a bunch of different groups have a version. The Wind and Rain by not Alton, I don't remember who it is, but their version is really great. So anyway, I did an arrangement of the Bonnie Swans for the group that I was playing in, and I listened to the story over and over and over, trying to get the arrangement right.
Yeah.
And it just stuck in my head. But I'm an older sister, so I thought it would be more fun from the murderous older sister's perspective.
Definitely. I'm an older sister too. In fact, I used to like when I would stay up really late and read scary books because by about like 13, 14, I was like dipping into adult horror. I would sneak into my sister's bedrooms and like they had these two little twin beds and I would sleep in between them because just like listening to the sounds of their sleep, like their breathing or snoring or just rustling around would kind of comfort me a little just to know there was like other
Oh.
people in the room. So, I mean,
Well,
they enabled me to read.
my sister is only 11 months and 1 day apart, and
Yeah.
younger than me, and that's very close.
Yes.
So we do not have quite as copacetic a relationship.
Oh, yeah. So you were they because my 2 younger sisters are very close, but they also fought a lot.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you know, we're kind of all we have for each other, so we,
Yeah.
still make it work
Make it
sometimes,
work. Yeah.
um
Yeah, do you find that the writing horror from, like, a female perspective and an experience is sort of where you would like to stay?
yeah, yeah, or dark fantasy. I mean, everything that I write is dark. That's just where I am, but
Yeah,
yeah, I am very fascinated by, I mean, women aren't allowed as much darkness in the world in presentation.
yeah,
There are a lot of constraints on how we're supposed to behave. And so, even in my nonfiction, I write about things that are considered taboo for a women, like
yeah,
women feeling violent feelings, women wanting sex,
yeah.
women, you know, and not in a like dominatrix sort of way, which I feel like is the one way women are allowed to be dark, kind of.
Yeah, that's funny you mentioned that. I see that too.
Yeah. So but it's just not, it's conditioning. It's not true. Women are as violent, women are as
Yeah.
sexual. Um, and so I just like saying so. So
Yeah,
yeah,
I love that. I have
yeah.
really been enjoying a lot of the perspectives that women are bringing to the table of horror lately. I feel like there's
Yeah.
just been a lot more of it, because I am never for want, I just there's so much out there that it's all over the place, and now I'm just like, "Yes, this is what I've been wanting, like, women as the villains, women as the complex character, not
Yeah.
just the woman in the attic or the unreliable narrator, that
Yeah, exactly.
yeah,
Yeah, I feel like women and queer people, we've been allowed, certain boundaries of narratives, and yeah, there are a lot of people doing like Mae Murray and
yes,
Christy Demistier. Um,
yes.
just doing like, yeah, writing really fabulous things. They're like, no, maybe not.
Yeah, no, it's definitely part of what excited me to bring it to the line, because we kicked off with LP Hernandez, and I loved that he had his father and son story, and then
Yeah.
we had Thigh Gap with Chandler Morrison, who I just found out this morning was nominated for a Splatterpunk Award. So I
Oh,
think that's
for
really
that story?
yes, for Thigh
Oh
Gap.
my god, that's
Yeah.
amazing.
So that's really wonderful. I love to see that. And then we had Bound Feet with Kelsea
Mhm.
Yu, who wrote this female friendship, you know, with a ghost story. And
Yeah.
then we had Taboo in Four Colors, written by Tim McGregor. And then your book, just with the queer themes and just the women. And can you talk a little bit more too about like the representation of queer characters?
Yeah, so I didn't think terribly consciously about it as I was
Mhm.
doing it. It was very much a kind of sexual awakening, coming of age story as I
Yeah,
was thinking about it. And so, um, I just thought about how this character who is, ultimately a lesbian, but, you know, doesn't discover it quite,
right.
um, how she would experience sexuality, especially in the aftermath of sexual violence, which is a strong subtext there. And that's another thing that, there are a lot of books about rape, and overcoming rape and, getting back at your perpetrator, having some sense of closure. But personally, and, as someone who is a rape survivor, I don't find that narrative terribly honest, because it's not like something that you experience and then you heal from and then you go on with your life
Yeah,
stronger. And,
yeah,
I think that it's something that informs how you move forward and how you experience sexuality afterwards. And so I was very curious about how that would impact her.
yeah.
Um, and part of that is looking at, I mean, there I realized in hindsight there's more voyeurism in this book than I've seen in other books. And so part of the different representation is seeing, like, looking at how other people experience their sexuality, how women experience sexuality together, how straight people experience sexuality together as a way of figuring out what it is she feels, if that makes sense.
It does make sense, and I like that your survivor story is, different than what we're seeing, like you said, in a lot of other stories of horror, um, because I do think it's important to represent all the different ways that people survive and heal from a situation like that. I think the revenge stories are fun, but I don't always necessarily think that those are realistic in the way that you said. Like, not
Yeah.
every woman can, you know, suit up and leave their lives and go hunt their victimizer or
Yeah.
abuser. That just doesn't happen a lot in real life, and also you could probably go to jail.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. Did you ever read, Tender Morsels by Margo Lanagan?
I haven't.
That was a book that, I mean, it was written many years ago now, and was part of what made me realize I can't write this story for young people, because that book, um, it it also deals with, sexual violence, and the UK wouldn't even bring it out for teens, and then in the US, it was banned by, well, pretty much everyone. I mean, it won the
Wow.
Prince, but then it was, like, banned by
Yeah.
everyone. Um, and I thought that it had a very, um, just an interesting take on it.
Yeah.
Um, but the in that story, the character, I mean, she basically ends up checking herself out and going and living in a fantasy world, and then her daughters end up living the revenge for her,
Oh,
after the fact,
interesting.
which I
Yeah.
actually thought was a fairly honest, for a fantasy. I thought it was a pretty honest
Yeah.
representation too. But I don't know. I don't, I not everybody ends up being a victim. So
Right,
I
and
was
I
more interested in that.
I will definitely put that book recommendation in the show notes too, where, with everything. Anything that you want to recommend that you feel like is also either a companion piece to this or was an inspiration to you. Like, did you when you were writing this? I think you told me it was a 10-year work in progress. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you
Yeah,
want to
and
talk
that
about that
was
a little bit?
I just was afraid to put my writing into the
Mhm.
world.
Mhm.
Um, 'Cause it's dark, it's sexual, it's violent, it's weird, and, it deals with mental health issues and some things like dissociation that I just, um I can read, I think maybe all of us can, but you can read different people's work and see things about them in it,
Yeah.
especially as you get to know them. And I just, I was a little scared of letting people see things about me, especially, I mean, there's some class stuff in there too.
Yeah.
And I got out of poverty and have been pretending to fit in the middle class for quite a long time. And
Yeah.
so I don't the actual writing, I actually wrote the first draft of this book in 3 months, um, 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And then but just fiddled with it forever because I just was afraid to put it out into the world. I was afraid to put any of my writing out into the world until the pandemic, when, it was when people started saying things about, service workers
Oh,
early
wow.
on in the pandemic. I
Yes.
suddenly realized that, a lot of people just didn't understand what it was like to be poor,
Yeah.
and I thought, "Oh, well, maybe I should start," and so that's when I started writing memoir nonfiction, and part of being okay with putting those stories out in the world was like, "Well, maybe it's okay for me to put my other stories out in the world too." So
I'm glad you did that. I mean, what was it about the call where you were just like, "Oh, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna try it. This is where I'm gonna send it."
honestly, I saw the call, like, out of the left corner of my eye and
Yeah.
assumed it was for something for people far cooler than me, and so I didn't even consider sending it in, and then Wendy Wagner, who's, everybody knows, but the editor of Nightmare and a
Yeah.
friend, and, she was like, "Pam, here's this, you should send to this," and I was like,
Oh,
"What?
well, that's
Oh, that
sweet.
applies to me?" Um and I was like, "Oh, okay." And then I, like, sent it in with my right hand, but still, like, pretended that it didn't really exist.
Yeah.
And when you
Yeah.
messaged me, I was like, "Wait, what? Is this happening?"
I love that. Like, first of all, I love that the writing community kind of sees those calls and then sees their friends in those calls. Like,
Yeah,
not necessarily like, "This is something that I wanna do, but I know somebody who's perfect for this call." Like, I love that people look out for each other like that. And I think that that's so brave that you just took a leap. Like, I think probably the hardest thing about being on social media, one of the hardest things about being on social media is just to kind of observe where everybody else is at in their journey, like,
yeah,
and that temptation to compare yourself to where everyone else is. And so it must be difficult to see like people getting accepted to things and doing things, and you have this fear. And
yeah,
obviously, I think normalizing rejection has been really a cool trend that I've been seeing, where people are, instead of just being like, "Did you hear that so and so was rejected like 300 times before?" It's not a rumor. You can see like
yeah,
clearly people are being rejected,
yeah,
and they keep going. So
yeah.
how do you deal with rejection?
I have gotten to a point where just, um I have a lot of pieces that I'm sending out, and I just make a point of sending them out 5 at a time for not I guess in the speculative world because you only do 1 at a time.
Yeah.
Um, but I just send a lot of things out, and I send them out many times, and when they come back, I just send them out again, and, it gets me down, but I also Gordon White, said on social media, I think at some point, that his weirdest pieces, the ones that ended up getting the most recognition,
Yeah.
were often the ones that took the most time
Yeah.
to be picked up, and I found that the with a lot of my pieces, the most transgressive ones, or the ones that are most weird stylistically, or that are saying something that other people aren't saying, they often do find a home, but they do take a little while to
Yeah.
get there. And so if something I mean, I think, a lot of people, when they've been doing this enough, they can tell which of their pieces are strongest and which aren't. So, but if it's a piece that I feel is strong, um, and it's not being immediately picked up, I just try to tell myself, okay, well, that means that it's really cool. So eventually
Yeah.
it
No,
would.
I definitely felt like this piece had something unique to offer the horror community at large,
Mhm.
like, especially fans. I I have I have a lot of readers in my circle because I mean, I do hang out on Twitter, but I mostly hang out on Bookstagram, which is where all the readers are. And I just see what people want, what people say that they want. And when I read this, I thought, this is exactly what people are saying that they want. Like, they want something that is engaging, that's dark, that has a lot of layers, that is a murder mystery, but also goes into character development and really focuses in on an inner development, that Gothic tone that people are craving. Like, I read, so it's funny because Catriona Ward has two books that came out, the Last House on Neela Street and then Sundial. But then Little Eve, which was a book that she, is a reprint from a while ago, that is the book that floored me. Like, she has these contemporary modern stories that came out first. Then Little Eve came out and I was like, that's what I wanted, because I don't think there's enough of that. Like, the
I haven't
very
read that one yet. I need to
dark
check that
Gothic.
out.
Yeah, I think you would really like it.
Okay.
So there is a shortage of good Gothic horror. I think that is, you know, people love Shirley Jackson and people are always looking for.
I love Shirley Jackson. She's my favorite writer, if that was not clear.
Yeah, no, no, I mean, obviously, like, people need to just, if you're a fan of Shirley Jackson, let's just plug it that way.
That I think is okay, so my literary goal in this world is to get a Shirley Jackson award.
Oh,
That's the only
yeah.
thing I want. That's the only recognition I will ever care about.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah, I mean, could you
So
imagine,
that's the
like,
biggest compliment you could possibly have paid me.
I feel like that 100%. I mean, and I did see elements of The Haunting of Hill House in this, in the way that you set up tone and atmosphere, and that long-standing sense of foreboding that never really goes away. Like, I love that. I love hanging on that, um, tension for I mean, this is so short, so it lives in,
Well, so is
tension.
that. I mean, her books are super short.
Yeah.
We Have Always Lived in the Castle is, it's like maybe 110 pages?
Yeah, and the lottery, people talk about that all the time. It's also very short. I mean, it's part of a short story collection. I think you can't buy it separately. It's part of a
I love
collection.
that collection, by the way. That collection is one of my favorite things on the planet. It's the first book that I ever, read to the end and then immediately turned back to the front cover and started rereading, and that was
Oh,
my
that just gave me goosebumps.
introduction to Shirley Jackson.
Yeah, that just gave me goosebumps. There's a few books that I've done that too as well. One of which was I'm thinking of Ending Things by Ian Reid. I,
Mm,
like,
yeah.
read it, and then the way that that book ended, I had to go back and read it again to see what all the pieces that I didn't pick up.
Yeah, yeah. That's awesome.
Well, I don't want to keep you too long. I definitely think that we could talk about Gothic horror for a very, very long time. You read Silvia Moreno-Garcia, by the way?
Yeah, oh, which one was her latest one?
Was
Um,
that the Dr. Moreau, the daughter of Dr. Moreau, that one? Or are you talking
oh,
about
maybe.
Mexican
I haven't
Gothic?
read that one though.
Did you read
Um,
Mexican Gothic?
yeah, I love Mexican Gothic.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I figured you would.
I do. I mean, anytime anything comes out that's Gothic, like, I love it. Um, and also, the history of Gothic is very much very, um, I did, patriarchal.
Oh, yeah.
It's always I love Rebecca and
Yeah.
I uh Jane Eyre is my favorite of those classic books. But
Yeah, I love that too.
I love how people are reinventing the Gothic now so that it's very, female oriented. Especially
Yeah,
like
there's actually that's why I did ask you if you've read Sylvia because she talks a lot about Gothic literature and just is so educational. Like I didn't know anything until I started reading her articles and just the different kinds and how to filter stories into them and the different narratives. And she has a whole thing about what you just said about patriarchal and female style, like
Mhm.
Gothic, and how like people of color are also entering into, being able to have these Gothic narratives. It's not just like, old white men or anything. It's
Yeah. And what I love about Gothic, especially Southern Gothic, which is so 100% my jam, is that
yeah,
it's almost always, at least as it's done in the US, it's almost always by um, people who don't have power and exposing that lack of power. So I think that's why Southern Gothic became such a thing because it's always about money. And there are just very few, you know, if you take general like 50 books, just general 50 books that have come out this year, very few of them will talk about poverty in any sort of realistic way. But if you
yeah,
take 50 Southern Gothic books, they're all about that. They're all
yeah,
about it. And it's not and there's no nice way to talk about poverty, but Gothic books aren't weepy either. They're
right.
very fun. And so, you know, I don't know, that's a tension that I just love.
I
So,
do too. I love that too. Tiffany McDaniel writes well. I mean, if people want to be crushed by kind of a modern Gothic style, but and then just I don't want to say too much about Tiffany McDaniel's like Betty. I don't know if you've read Betty.
no, I'll look that up.
Yeah, you definitely have to check her out. Like it is like a coming of age story, but it has a lot of hard things in it. My mom had to actually tap out of it. Like I don't know if you've read The Bastard Out of Carolina.
Oh my god.
I
Yeah,
know.
so she's definitely one of my heroes too.
Okay, so
Definitely, definitely.
Tiffany McDaniel is definitely in that vein,
Okay,
and
okay,
Betty
awesome.
and Betty too, so and then she has a new one coming out that I just read, but it was an early copy, and it's called The Savage Side.
Okay.
Also very extremely female experience, but modern Gothic because it's told in today's time, but yeah. Anyway, yeah, we could definitely do this a
Yeah.
lot.
That's awesome.
I just want Nightworms fans to know that the Bonnie Swans is available now. It's very short read. It's a one sitting binge. That's exactly how I would explain it. You're gonna start and then you're not gonna want to stop. So you can pick this up. I'm going to put that in the link into the notes with the whole Cemetery Gates, My Dark Library line. That all, we've made sure to brand them all the same on the spines and on the covers so that it's collectible for your library. So yeah, definitely get your collection
Yeah, I
today.
think I've got them all up here.
It's so fun. I saw like an old collection from like the 50s that had like the same branding and all of that. And that's where I kind of drew inspiration. I was like,
Oh, cool.
these need to all just be like a unit. Like you can't just have one. So
Yeah, and now they I saw on social media that they've all got covers now, and so
yeah,
they're
they're
all real
all
things.
right. Yeah. R.A. Busby's Corporate Body is available for pre-order, which is it's definitely body horror, um, lab testing and lots of
Oh, yay.
nastiness. And yeah, there was a few times I felt like, I could swallow a little puke in my mouth right now. This is really gross.
That's always a good sign.
Anyway, it was a real pleasure talking to you today. Thank you
Yeah.
so much for
Thank you
joining
so much for
me.
having me.
Yeah, and thank you. I mean, thank you for submitting your story to My Dark
Oh.
Library. I think horror fans are the better for it.
Oh, thank you for picking it, bringing it out. This is such a
Yeah,
good experience.
absolutely. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much. I'm going to end the recording, but you stay.
Okay.